Most people waste 80% of their reading, not because they're lazy, but because they don't know how to retain what they learn. They flip through pages, highlight everything, feel smart for a moment, but by the next day, gone. Just fragments, half-baked notes, forgotten facts. Sound familiar? Now picture this. A student in Chicago reads for 30 minutes, closes the book, and teaches the lesson back like a pro without ever looking at it again. An entrepreneur in Texas remembers every insight from a 300-page business book and uses it to scale his company. What's their secret? They don't have photographic memory. They've learned a simple but powerful system to remember what matters, and today, you'll learn it too. This audiobook is not just about reading faster, it's about learning deeply, remembering naturally, and applying what you read like it's second nature. Because real power isn't in how many books you read. It's in how many books become part of who you are. So, if you're tired of forgetting and ready to master memory like a high performer, keep listening. You're about to change the way you read forever. Chapter 1. Why you forget what you read. The brain's forgetting curve, what really happens after you close the book. You know that weird feeling when you finish a chapter of a book, feel like you've learned something valuable, but then, just a few hours later, you can't remember a single sentence from it? Yeah, that's not just you. It's not that your memory is broken or that you're somehow less smart than others. It's your brain doing what it's designed to do. It's called the forgetting curve, and it's quietly at work behind the scenes every time you read. Here's the thing, your brain is constantly trying to protect you from mental overload. Every day, it's bombarded with thousands of tiny details. What someone wore, what you saw scrolling through your phone, what you ate for breakfast. It can't store all of that, so it filters. And the stuff you just casually skimmed over in that book you were excited about, if it didn't leave a big enough emotional or practical imprint, your brain quietly tosses it out, not out of malice, but because it thinks it's doing you a favor. Researchers have actually charted this forgetting process. Within an hour, you can forget nearly 50% of what you just learned. Within a day, that number climbs even higher. And by the end of the week? Well, let's just say it's no wonder you feel like the book never happened. That curve, this steep drop-off in memory retention, isn't a sign of weakness. It's human nature. It's biology. But here's where it gets interesting and hopeful. Your brain forgets fast, unless you give it a reason not to. Think about the last time you had to teach someone something you just learned, or the moment you related a new idea to a problem in your own life. Suddenly, that information stuck. Why? Because you interacted with it. You made it matter. You didn't just read it, you touched it, emotionally or mentally. The problem is, most of us read like we're racing. One page flips to the next. We're just trying to get through the book. But speed isn't the enemy. Passivity is. When you're not engaging, when your mind's just coasting, the forgetting curve is at its sharpest. That's why you can read a full self-help book and still feel unchanged afterward. You read, but your brain didn't get the signal that this stuff was worth holding on to. Imagine your brain as a library with a strict filing system. If you don't label something as important through reflection, emotional connection, or use, the librarian throws it in the discard pile. No record. No trace. Gone. So when you close that book and say to yourself, "I'll remember this," just know, you probably won't. Not unless you interrupt the forgetting curve. Not unless you take what you read and make it yours. Talk about it. Apply it. Question it. Sketch it out. Share it with a friend. Connect it to a memory. That's how you hack your brain's natural pattern and keep the gold from slipping through the cracks. And once you learn how to do that, something powerful happens. Books stop being temporary escapes. They start becoming part of you. And that, my friend, is where the real transformation begins. Stay with me, because up next, we're unlocking passive reading versus active engagement, why one works and the other doesn't. And once you know it, you'll read differently, forever. Passive reading versus active engagement, why one works and the other doesn't. Let's talk about something that almost everyone does, but almost no one realizes they're doing wrong: passive reading. You know that moment when you sit down with a book, maybe with a cup of coffee in hand, your phone on silent, everything set up just right, and you start reading, but 20 pages later, you stop and realize you have no clue what you just read? Like, literally, nothing stuck. You were turning the pages, sure, your eyes were moving, but your brain? Not really in the room. That's passive reading. And it's so sneaky because it feels like you're doing something productive, but your mind's just coasting. Passive reading is like watching a movie while scrolling through your phone. You see the scenes, maybe you even hear the dialogue, but when someone asks what the movie was about, you're stuck. You weren't really in it. Now compare that with those times when a book hits you right in the gut, when you find yourself pausing mid-sentence to underline something, when you sit up straighter because a phrase makes you feel seen, when you reread a paragraph just to soak it in one more time. That's active engagement. And it's a whole different world. Active reading isn't about being perfect or super academic. It's about being present. It's about asking questions in your head as you go, wait, how does this relate to me? Or, do I agree with this? Or even, I need to try this tomorrow. It's about having a tiny inner conversation with the author, instead of just sitting back and letting the words float by. Here's the secret no one tells you. The brain remembers what it wrestles with. It holds on to things it uses. Passive reading is like watching the rain hit a window. Active engagement is like going outside and dancing in it. When you're involved, when you interact with the words, when you connect dots and challenge ideas, the book becomes a part of you. It stops being just text and becomes transformation. Think about it. How many books have you read that made you say, that was interesting, but you couldn't explain a single idea from it a week later? That's because you didn't own the ideas. You borrowed them for a moment, but you didn't move them in. Active reading invites you to move in. To slow down just enough to ask, why does this matter to me right now? Even writing in the margins, taking notes in your phone, or just talking out loud to yourself after a good chapter, it all creates little hooks for memory. It tells your brain, hey, this stuff's worth keeping. And here's what's wild. Once you start reading this way, your entire relationship with books changes. You no longer need to read 5 more books to feel like you're learning. You could read one, deeply, and it could shift your whole mindset. That's how powerful active engagement is. So the next time you sit down with a book, don't just read to finish. Read to feel. Read to question. Read to interrupt yourself. Because that's how you move from being a passive consumer to becoming someone who actually learns, grows, and remembers. And up next, we're diving the hidden role of stress, distractions, and information overload. Trust me, you'll want to steal this. The hidden role of stress, distractions, and information overload. Let's be real for a moment. How many times have you sat down to read something important? Maybe a book you've been meaning to dive into, or an article that's supposed to change the way you think, and your mind just drifts. Suddenly, you're thinking about that one awkward thing you said 5 years ago, or you remember you haven't replied to a message, or ding! A notification lights up your phone, and you're gone. You try to refocus, but it's like trying to read in the middle of a storm. That's what stress, distractions, and information overload do to us. And the worst part? Most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. We blame ourselves. Why can't I focus? Why do I forget everything I read? But the truth is, your brain isn't broken. It's just overwhelmed. Stress is a quiet thief. Even if you're not consciously freaking out, your body might still be in survival mode. When you're under stress, even the subtle background kind from daily life, your brain shifts its priorities. It's not trying to help you retain information. It's trying to protect you. It's scanning for threats, trying to manage emotions, and keeping your system alert. And guess what falls to the bottom of the list? Memory and concentration. Now add in distractions. We live in the noisiest world in human history. Our phones buzz, our apps ping, our timelines scroll endlessly. And every little interruption, even the ones we think we're used to, steals our attention like a pickpocket in a crowd. Reading becomes a battle between the book and everything else screaming for your focus. But maybe the sneakiest culprit of all is information overload. We have access to more knowledge in one day than most people throughout history had in a lifetime. Sounds amazing, right? But here's the catch. Your brain wasn't designed to absorb that much, that fast. When we're constantly consuming videos, tweets, emails, podcasts, news, it all starts to blur. Instead of helping us learn, it paralyzes us. Our mind becomes like a messy desktop with 100 tabs open, and nothing really gets saved. It's no wonder we forget. It's no wonder we struggle to retain anything we read. Because when your brain is dealing with stress, distractions, and overload all at once, there's no room left to actually connect with what you're reading. But here's where things get hopeful. Awareness is powerful. When you understand why your mind feels scattered, you can start to reclaim control. You can begin to notice when stress is creeping in, when your attention is being hijacked, and when it's time to slow the input so your brain can actually make sense of it. Imagine this. What if you created tiny reading rituals that protected your focus? What if, instead of stuffing more into your brain, you gave it space to breathe, to really absorb, reflect, and remember? That kind of reading doesn't just feed your mind, it frees it. So no, it's not your fault you can't remember everything you read, but it is in your power to change it. And in the next part, we'll explore exactly how to do that, starting with reading with intention, not pressure. Because once you stop fighting your brain and start working with it, remembering what you read won't feel like a struggle anymore. It'll feel natural. Stick with me. This is where it all starts to shift. And up next, we're diving into something that'll make this even easier. The 3R formula that turns any reading session into a memory magnet. Trust me, you'll want to steal this. Chapter 2. The 3R formula to lock in learning. Read with intention. How to prime your mind before you begin. Have you ever opened a book, stared at the words, flipped a few pages, and suddenly realized you've read 5 paragraphs but absorbed nothing? It's like your eyes did the reading, but your brain wasn't invited to the party. You feel frustrated, maybe even a little defeated. You start to wonder if something's wrong with you. Why can't you focus? Why don't you remember what you just read? But here's the truth. The problem isn't your brain. It's your approach. Most of us read the way we scroll, automatically, reactively, without a clear purpose. We pick up a book because we should, or because we want to feel productive. But we don't stop to ask, why am I reading this? What am I hoping to walk away with? And that's where everything begins to unravel. Reading with intention is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, your brain knows what to look for. It becomes alert, engaged, ready. When you read with purpose, you're not just absorbing words. You're hunting for meaning. You're building connections. You're present. Imagine walking into a grocery store with no shopping list. You wander the aisles, grabbing random things you don't need. You get home and realize you forgot the milk. Now imagine going in with a focused list. You move with direction. You make better choices. You save time and energy. Reading works the same way. When your mind has a clear list, a reason, it knows what matters and what to ignore. So how do you prime your mind before you read? You start by asking better questions. What's the big idea I want to understand? What problem am I hoping this chapter will help me solve? Is there one golden takeaway I want to walk away with? These simple reflections shift your brain from passive mode to active engagement. Your attention sharpens. Your curiosity turns on. You start reading with a mission. And it doesn't take long. Just a minute of mindful pause before diving in can make all the difference. Set the tone. Create a tiny ritual. Take a deep breath. Silence distractions. Remind yourself why this matters. Because when your heart connects with your reason, your brain follows. You begin to care more deeply about the words on the page, and that emotional link hardwires memory in a way no highlighter ever could. The truth is, intention turns reading into a conversation, not a chore. You're not just taking in someone else's ideas, you're actively wrestling with them, shaping them, making them your own. That's when learning sticks. That's when you stop forgetting. And once you start reading this way, it becomes addictive. You'll never want to go back to skimming and scanning without meaning. You'll crave the depth. You'll feel the difference in how you think, speak, and show up in the world. So the next time you open a book, don't rush in. Pause, ask, connect. Set your intention like lighting a match. Because that one spark, it changes everything. And now that your mind is primed, let's unlock the formula that actually helps you remember what you read, long after you've turned the last page. Stick around. It only gets better from here. Reflect deeply, turning information into personal insight. Have you ever finished a chapter in a book, closed it, and felt nothing? Like you just consumed a bunch of words, maybe even highlighted a few lines, but it didn't really do anything to you? It's frustrating, right? Because deep down, you're not just reading to collect information. You're reading to grow, to understand, to change. But that change doesn't happen just by absorbing facts. It happens when you take the time to reflect, not just casually, but deeply. Reflection is where the magic lives. It's the moment you take something external, a quote, an idea, a story, and ask, how does this connect to me? You slow down. You turn the spotlight inward. And that's when knowledge stops being abstract and starts becoming yours. Think about it like this. Reading is like planting seeds. But if you never water them, if you don't give them sunlight and time, they don't grow. Reflection is that water. It's how you nourish what you've read so it can bloom into real wisdom. Let's say you read something about time management, a nice concept, maybe even inspiring. But what if, instead of moving on to the next chapter, you paused and asked yourself, where am I wasting time right now? What part of my day feels chaotic or unintentional? Suddenly, that page isn't just about time management. It's about your mornings, your choices, your patterns. That's insight. That's when the words on the page begin to shift something inside you. And you don't need hours to do this. Sometimes it's a few minutes of sitting quietly after reading, just letting thoughts stir. Other times it's journaling a messy paragraph about what hit you the hardest. Or maybe it's walking around the block, letting your brain chew on the idea while your body moves. Reflection doesn't have to look a certain way. It just has to be honest. The truth is, our lives are so full of noise. So much information, so many voices, so many shoulds. Deep reflection is like pulling the brakes. It's a moment to say, wait, what do I actually think about this? What does this mean for me, right now in this season of my life? And when you make space for that kind of pause, you'll notice something powerful: clarity. You'll start to hear your own voice beneath the noise. You'll begin to see patterns in your thinking and opportunities for change that weren't obvious before. You'll stop being just a consumer of ideas and become a creator of transformation. Because, let's face it, consuming more doesn't make us wiser. Processing what we consume does. Insight doesn't come from reading more books. It comes from reading one book well and letting it crack you open a little. So next time you read something that tugs at you, don't rush past it. Sit with it. Ask better questions. Let it echo through your own experiences. That's where the real learning happens. Not in the pages, but in the pauses. Not in the facts, but in the feelings they awaken. And once you taste that kind of insight, you'll crave it. You'll want every book, every conversation, every piece of content to take you there. Because that's when you stop just learning and start changing. And what comes next? That's where things get exciting. Recall actively, the fastest way to cement what you just learned. Okay, quick question. Have you ever read something really interesting, felt like you totally got it, only to forget it completely a day or two later? Yeah, you're not alone. It's actually super common. And it's not because you're not smart. It's because your brain didn't get the memo that it was supposed to keep that information. See, our brains are sneaky like that. They're constantly filtering what they think is important to remember versus what's just passing noise. And when you only passively read or listen, your brain often files that under temporary, like cool thought, but probably not needed later. But when you recall something, when you try to pull it back up from memory, your brain goes, oh wait, this must matter. Let's hold on to this. That's the power of active recall, It's not about memorizing in some robotic, boring way. It's about making your brain work a little, just enough to reinforce those mental connections. And the more you recall, the deeper those connections go. Imagine reading a chapter and then closing the book and asking yourself, okay, what were the 3 main ideas? What really stood out to me? You're not looking at the page. You're just testing yourself. That tiny moment where your brain struggles a bit to retrieve what you just read is gold. That's when the learning actually sticks. Or think about watching a YouTube video or listening to a podcast. Instead of jumping straight to the next one, what if you paused and told someone else what you just learned? Even if it's messy or imperfect, you're translating knowledge into your own words. That's active recall too. And it works like magic. There's something satisfying about it too. When you try to remember something and it comes back to you, boom, that little jolt of, yes, I actually know this. That's your brain getting stronger, faster, sharper. It builds confidence. It makes you want to keep going. And get this, recall isn't just about learning facts or ideas. It can also deepen your emotional connection to what you're learning. Like, if you read a story that touched you and later tell a friend about it, you're not just remembering the plot, you're reliving the feeling. That kind of recall helps you integrate the message on a whole different level. But here's the catch. Most people don't do this. They just consume and scroll, consume and scroll. And that's why so much of what we read or watch evaporates like mist. If you really want to keep what matters, if you want your learning to mean something, then make it a habit to pause, reflect, and recall. Even better, turn it into a little game. After you read a chapter, jot down a bullet list of key points. Try to explain the concept to your younger sibling, or even your dog. Seriously, it helps. Or voice note yourself on your phone, like you're teaching future you what you just learned today. It might feel awkward at first, but trust me, your brain will thank you. Because here's the truth, recall is the fastest way to tell your brain, hey, this isn't just information, I want this to be part of me. And when your brain gets that message, that's when real growth happens. So next time you finish reading something powerful, don't just nod and move on. Pause. Play it back in your mind. Say it out loud. Teach it. Summarize it. Make it yours. That tiny effort. It's the difference between forgetting tomorrow and transforming your life forever. And speaking of transformation, what if you could train your brain to always remember what matters most? What if there was a simple shift, just one, that could flip the switch on how fast you learn? Well, keep listening, because that's exactly where we're headed next. Chapter 3. Real-world hacks to improve memory recall. Chunking, mapping, and linking. Simple tools that work like magic. Let's be honest. Sometimes learning feels like trying to drink from a fire hose, right? So much information, all at once. You read a chapter, and by the end of it, your brain feels foggy. You watch a documentary or listen to a podcast and go, wait, what did I just hear? It's not because you're not paying attention. It's because our brains weren't designed to memorize long strings of scattered info like that. But here's the good news. Your brain loves structure. It thrives on patterns. And once you start organizing information in a way that your brain naturally understands, something clicks. Suddenly, things that used to feel overwhelming start making sense. That's where chunking, mapping, and linking come in. And I promise, these aren't just fancy learning hacks. They're mental superpowers in disguise. Imagine trying to memorize a phone number like this. 125364997. Total chaos. But the moment you group it as 125364997, it instantly becomes easier to remember. That's chunking. It's taking a bunch of loose bits and grouping them into meaningful chunks. Your brain goes from too much at once to, okay, I can handle this. It works for numbers, names, concepts, everything. When you read something new, instead of trying to memorize line by line, stop and ask, what's the big idea here? Can I group these facts into categories? Boom! You've just made your learning 10 times stickier. Now, let's talk about mapping. Ever try to study by rereading something over and over, hoping it'll magically sink in? Yeah, that rarely works. But drawing it out? That's a different story. When you create a mind map, just a simple web of ideas on paper, you're doing more than taking notes. You're visualizing your thinking. Your brain lights up in a different way. It starts seeing how things connect, like roads on a map instead of random dots. Even doodling small symbols or arrows between ideas can change everything. You're not just reading anymore, you're building a mental world where each idea has its place. And then there's linking. This one's my favorite because it's where memory meets meaning. It's not just, what does this fact say? It's, what does this remind me of? When you link new information to something you already know, it sticks like Velcro. Learning about how habits form, link it to how you always reach for your phone first thing in the morning. Studying the concept of compound interest, link it to planting a seed that keeps growing. The more personal the link, the deeper it goes. It's like you're telling your brain, hey, this matters to me. Don't let it go. The truth is, we've been trained to think learning is all about cramming and grinding, but real, lasting learning happens when you start working with your brain instead of against it. Chunking simplifies the load. Mapping brings clarity. Linking adds meaning. Put those three together, and suddenly, you don't just know things, you understand them. You can use them, explain them, remember them years from now. And it's not just for school or study sessions. These tools work in everyday life. Want to remember someone's name and details you just met? Link it to something personal. Want to understand a news article better? Map the key points. Want to learn a new skill faster? Chunk it down into manageable parts. These aren't tricks. They're how the smartest learners think. And the best part? You already have everything you need to start. Just you, a pen, your thoughts, and a willingness to play with how ideas fit together. So next time you're learning something new, don't let it just pass through you. Break it down, draw it out, connect it to your world. Watch what happens when you stop stuffing your brain with facts and start building with them. And if you're wondering how this all leads to memory that feels almost automatic, stick around. Because next, we're diving into a technique so powerful it's used by memory champions, but simple enough for you to start using today. The power of spaced repetition and mental rehearsal. Let's talk about something that might just change the way you think about learning forever. The power of spaced repetition and mental rehearsal. Now, I know those might sound like terms pulled out of some scientific research paper, but stick with me. Because once you get how these two ideas work, you'll wonder why no one taught you this sooner. Seriously, this is how you go from forgetting everything you study to remembering stuff like your brain was made for it. You ever cram for a test the night before, maybe pulling an all-nighter, and then, poof, a few days later, it's all gone? Yeah, we've all been there. That's because cramming dumps information into your short-term memory, and your brain's like, cool story, but I'm deleting this in 48 hours. It's not because you're not smart. It's because the brain doesn't store things it thinks are unimportant. And one-time info? It's trash in the system. Unless you tell your brain, hey, this matters, keep this. And that's exactly what spaced repetition does. Here's the secret. The brain loves repetition, but not just any repetition. It loves repetition with space between it. Not just going over something again and again in one sitting. That's exhausting and, honestly, ineffective. But coming back to that same thing a day later, then a few days after that, then a week later, now that is where the magic happens. Each time you review it, your brain reinforces that neural pathway. It's like walking the same trail in a forest. Every time you do it, the path gets clearer, stronger, more familiar. Eventually, it becomes second nature. And it doesn't even take hours. Just a few minutes a day of smart spaced review. That's it. You could use flashcards, a journal, a voice note, anything. What matters is the pattern. Because your memory works like Velcro. Stuff sticks better the more you come back to it. But here's where it gets even more powerful. Combine that with mental rehearsal, and you're not just remembering, you're owning what you learn. Mental rehearsal is this beautiful little trick where, instead of just reviewing something passively, you close your eyes and imagine yourself using it. You walk through it in your mind. Athletes do this all the time. Picture a basketball player rehearsing every step of the free throw. Feet planted, arms up, flick of the wrist. That mental practice, it actually strengthens the same brain pathways as real practice. So imagine applying that to learning. You just learned a new idea. Say, how to explain the concept of compounding. Don't just reread it. Close your eyes. Picture yourself teaching it to a friend. Hear your own voice breaking it down. See their nods. Feel the confidence. That rehearsal, it's imprinting the knowledge into your brain as if you've lived it. And that's the difference between knowing something for a test and knowing it for life. The best part? You can do this anywhere, on the bus, while walking, before bed. Just 5 minutes of visualizing or reviewing spaced out over time beats hours of cramming. No burnout, no overwhelm, just smart, brain-friendly learning. And I want you to think about this. What would your life look like if the things you learn actually stuck? If you didn't have to constantly relearn the same things over and over. If every book, every video, every experience started building on the last, effortlessly. That's not a fantasy. That's what happens when you let spaced repetition and mental rehearsal become part of how you learn. Not hard, just intentional. So the next time you learn something new, resist the urge to rush through it, space it out, revisit it, mentally walk through it like you've done it 100 times. And watch how fast your brain starts working for you instead of against you. And trust me, this is only the beginning. Because if you think spaced repetition is powerful, wait till you see how changing just one habit around distractions can unlock a whole new level of focus. Ready for that? Stay tuned. How to use everyday moments to reinforce what you read. Okay, so let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever read something really good, like a quote that made you pause or an idea that gave you chills, and then a few hours later it just vanished from your mind? Gone, like it never even happened? You're not alone. And no, it's not because you're forgetful or not paying attention. It's because most of us have never been taught how to hold on to what we read in a way that actually sticks with us beyond the page. But here's the good news. There's a way to change that, and it doesn't involve flashcards, highlighters, or locking yourself in a library. It involves something you already have, your everyday life. Yep, the moments that seem small, walking to the store, doing the dishes, waiting in traffic, even scrolling through your phone, those can become powerful tools to reinforce what you read if you know how to use them. Let's break this down. Imagine you're reading a book about confidence. There's this powerful line that says confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to move forward, in spite of it. It hits you. You nod. You highlight it. Maybe you even post it on Instagram. But then what? You keep reading. You move on. In that moment, it fades. Now imagine this instead. You're brushing your teeth later that night, and suddenly, that line pops back into your head. You don't brush it off. You pause. You replay it in your mind. You whisper it. You ask yourself, where in my life have I let fear stop me? You feel it. You own it. That line just became a part of you, not just a quote you read, but a truth you lived with for a moment. That's what everyday reinforcement looks like. The brain learns best when we connect knowledge to real emotion and real context. So when you read something valuable, don't just leave it in the book. Pull it into your life. Say it out loud while walking. Bring it up in conversation. Apply it to a situation you're dealing with, even if just in your head. You're not just remembering it, you're rewiring your brain around it. Let's say you're reading about habit change, and the book says, you become what you repeat. Boom, mic drop moment, right? So the next time you're about to hit snooze or procrastinate on something small, that quote becomes your quiet whisper in the background. And if it doesn't come naturally at first, you make it show up. You call it back, on purpose. Here's the real kicker. Every time you bring something you've read into a normal, boring, everyday moment, you're telling your brain, hey, this matters, remember this. And the more your brain sees the same idea show up in different settings, your kitchen, your commute, your relationships, the more it sees it as truth. Not just information, not just theory, but something real. And get this, the more you do this, the more you start seeing connections automatically. It becomes a habit. Reading a book no longer ends at the last page. It becomes part of how you think, how you speak, how you show up in your day. You could be pouring coffee and suddenly go, oh wow, this reminds me of that thing I read yesterday. That's when you know it's clicking. You don't need to wait for perfect study conditions. You don't need an hour of silence. You just need intention. You need to look for ways to link your reading with your reality. Life is already giving you 100 chances a day to reinforce what you're learning. You just haven't been using them until now. So the next time you read something powerful, don't just save it to your notes app and forget about it. Ask, where does this show up in my day? When can I think about this again? How can I say this out loud, or explain it to someone, or test it in real life? That's how reading becomes remembering. That's how books start transforming, not just your thoughts, but your life. And if you think using everyday moments is powerful, just wait until you discover how asking one single question after reading can unlock levels of clarity and retention you've never imagined. Yep, we're going there next. Stay with me. Chapter 4. How to read with purpose, not pressure. Choosing the right book for your learning goal. Let me ask you something personal, and be honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever picked up a book that everyone was raving about, only to get halfway through and feel like, why am I not getting anything out of this? Maybe you pushed through out of guilt. Maybe you gave up halfway. Maybe it just didn't click, not because it was a bad book, but because it wasn't the right book for where you are right now. And that's the part most people skip. See, we've been taught to read books the way we pick meals off a menu, based on what sounds good, what looks popular, or what someone else recommends. But when it comes to learning, real learning, the kind that shifts your thinking and sticks with you, it's not about the book that worked for your friend. It's about choosing the book that speaks to your current need, your goal, your struggle, your curiosity. Let's make it real. Say you want to be more productive. You're tired of wasting time, missing deadlines, feeling like your day runs you instead of the other way around. So what do? You look up best productivity books, and boom, hundreds of titles hit you. One promises 5 a.m. success secrets. Another is all about time blocking. Then there's one that says, throw out your to-do list altogether. And suddenly, you're overwhelmed before you even pick a book. Here's the thing. Each of those books might be brilliant, but they're not all brilliant for you, not at this moment. If you're struggling to even get out of bed in the morning, maybe a book on building discipline from scratch is better than one about optimizing your 15-hour CEO workday. If your problem is burnout, a book about doing less might help more than a book about doing faster. It's not just about what a book says, it's about when you read it. Choosing the right book for your learning goal is like having a conversation with your future self. Ask, where do I want to grow? And even more importantly, what's holding me back right now? Are you stuck in fear? Are you overwhelmed with information? Are you struggling to focus? The clearer your question, the easier it becomes to find the book that feels like it was written for you. And sometimes, you won't know what the right book is until you open the first few pages and feel that pull, that quiet yes in your chest. That sense of, whoa, this author gets me. You're not forcing yourself to read. You're being drawn in. That's a sign. That's alignment. That's the kind of book that doesn't just teach you, it meets you. And listen, it's okay to put a book down if it's not doing that. Seriously. Just because you bought it, or because it has 1 million 5-star reviews, doesn't mean you owe it your time. The right book will feel like someone reaching across the pages and saying, hey, I know exactly what you're dealing with. Let's figure it out together. That's the kind of book that changes you. Now here's the beautiful twist. You don't even have to finish a book to get value from it. Sometimes, One chapter, one story, one sentence is all it takes to unlock something that's been stuck in your mind for months. So instead of asking, "What book should I read next?" try asking, "What part of me is hungry to grow, and what kind of wisdom would actually feed that?" That's when books stop being homework and start becoming tools for transformation. That's when reading turns into a journey where every page moves you closer to clarity, to confidence, to the version of you that you've been working toward all along. And if that idea excites you, wait till we talk about how to actually absorb what you're reading once you've found that perfect book. Because let's be real, reading it is one thing, but remembering it, using it, living it, that's where the real magic happens. Stick with me. You don't want to miss this next part. Slowing down to speed up, the myth of reading fast. Have you ever caught yourself racing through a book, flipping pages as if you're in a competition? But when you close it, you realize you can't remember a single thing you just read? You nodded your head at the good parts, maybe even highlighted a few lines. But deep down, you know it didn't stick. It felt like eating fast food when you're starving. You're full, but not satisfied. That right there is the trap so many of us fall into, believing that the faster we read, the smarter or more productive we are, that more books mean more growth, more pages mean more power. But let's pause and really think about that. What's the point of tearing through 30 books a year if you can't apply even one idea from them? Here's the truth no one tells you. Slowing down isn't weakness, it's wisdom. In fact, slowing down is the secret sauce to deep learning, to meaningful change. It's not about how much you read, it's about how deeply the words reach you, how fully they take root in your mind, how gently they shift the way you see the world. Let me tell you a little story. There was this guy, super smart, super driven. He made a goal to read 100 books in a year. And he did. Checked off every single one. But at the end of the year, when someone asked him, "Which book changed you the most?" he couldn't answer. Not one title came to mind. That shook him. Then there was another guy. He read just 3 books that same year, but he read each one slowly. He paused, reflected, took notes, talked about them with friends, even reread parts that hit him hard. And those 3 books, they rewired the way he thought. They helped him start a new business, heal an old relationship, get his sleep, and focus back on track. 3 books. Not 30. Not 100. That's the difference between speed and substance. The myth of reading fast is this sneaky belief that more input equals more output. But our brains aren't machines. They're not designed to process wisdom at 10x speed. You can't rush insight. You can't fast forward through personal growth. Some sentences need time to breathe. Some chapters need space to settle in your heart. Some ideas won't unlock their meaning until you live with them a while. Think about your favorite meal. You wouldn't gulp it down in 30 seconds and call that a good experience, right? You'd take your time, savor each bite, let the flavors unfold. Reading is the same. When you slow down, you actually start tasting the ideas. You start making connections between what the author's saying and what's happening in your own life. And something amazing happens when you give yourself permission to read slow. You start remembering more. You start applying what you read. You start feeling the shift. That one paragraph about setting boundaries, it suddenly becomes the reason you finally said no to that toxic situation. That one metaphor about courage, it sticks with you when you're facing something hard. That one line about time management, it changes the way you plan your week. You're not just reading anymore. You're transforming. And the irony, that transformation moves you forward faster than skimming ever could. Slowing down actually speeds you up, not in page count, but in personal evolution. You begin to act differently, think differently. You don't need 500 new ideas. You just need one right idea to take root and grow. So if you've ever felt behind because someone on YouTube or Twitter reads 2 books a week, stop. You're not behind. You're on your own path. And maybe the next time you pick up a book, instead of asking, "How fast can I finish this?" ask, "What here could change my life if I truly understood it?" Now imagine if you applied that mindset to every book you read. Imagine the kind of clarity and focus you'd have. That's where we're headed next. How to turn a good book into your own personal blueprint for change. So don't go anywhere, because what's coming might just change how you read forever. Creating a ritual that makes reading stick and feel enjoyable. Let's be honest. How many times have you picked up a book, read a few pages, got distracted by your phone, checked your messages, wandered into the kitchen for a snack, and then just never returned to the book again? You're not alone. The truth is, reading isn't just about finding time. It's about protecting it. It's about creating a space, a vibe, a ritual that signals to your brain, "Hey, this is sacred. This matters." And when you do that, reading doesn't feel like a chore anymore. It becomes something you look forward to, like lighting a candle at night, or pouring your favorite tea, or slipping into your coziest chair. It becomes a moment of peace in a noisy world. The power of ritual is real, and it's honestly one of the biggest secrets to making your reading stick. Because let's face it, the world is built to distract you. Every app on your phone is designed to pull your attention. Every minute of quiet is threatened by noise. So if you don't design your reading time with intention, the world will design it for you, and it'll fill it with everything except what your soul actually needs. So what if your reading time felt different? What if, instead of just squeezing in a few rushed pages before bed, you made it feel like a mini retreat, a personal ritual that whispers, "Slow down, be here." Maybe it starts with a time of day. Maybe it's early morning, before the house wakes up, when everything's still and your mind is fresh. Or maybe it's late at night, when the lights are low and your thoughts settle like dust after a long day. Pick a time that feels like yours. Now, add a little atmosphere. Light a candle. Play soft instrumental music. Sit near a window with sunlight pouring in. Brew your favorite cup of coffee or tea. Something warm. Something that feels like a treat. These little things, they sound small, but they're signals. They tell your brain, this is not just any moment. This is a moment that matters. And let's talk about your phone. Put it on airplane mode. Place it in another room if you have to. Because nothing breaks the magic of a good book faster than a notification ding. You deserve uninterrupted time with your thoughts. With the author's thoughts. With your growth. Some people even like to pair reading with journaling, a little notebook by your side to jot down quotes, questions, sparks of insight. Others use sticky tabs to mark the parts that speak to them. It's not about being fancy, it's about being present. About letting the book interact with your real life. And here's the wild thing. When you create a ritual around reading, your brain starts to crave it. It becomes this comforting, grounding part of your day. You start to look forward to it the way a child looks forward to story time. And the more you love the ritual, the deeper you sink into the pages. You absorb more. You remember more. You live more of what you read. You see, it's not just about information, it's about transformation. And transformation happens when reading is no longer just another thing on your to-do list, but a meaningful moment woven into the rhythm of your life. So if reading has felt hard, inconsistent, or uninspired lately, maybe the answer isn't more motivation. Maybe it's more ritual, more care, more space to make it feel yours. Because when you create an environment where reading feels safe, nourishing, and even a little magical, that's when it starts to stick. That's when the books don't just sit on your shelf but actually come alive inside you. Now that you've walked through the science, the strategies, and the simple shifts that unlock powerful memory retention, pause for a second. Take a deep breath. Because what you're about to do next matters more than everything you've just heard. Let me tell you why. A few years ago, there was a man in Virginia. His name was Elijah. He was a regular guy, mid-30s, full-time job, 2 kids. He loved books, bought them, collected them, stacked them like trophies. But there was one problem. He couldn't remember a thing he read. He'd finish a chapter feeling inspired, even motivated, but by the next week, the ideas were foggy. The quotes he underlined? Blurry. The tools he wanted to use in real life? Forgotten. Sound familiar? That frustration made him feel broken, like he wasn't smart enough. Like everyone else got the secret manual for learning, and he just missed it. But here's the twist. Elijah wasn't the problem. His system was. So he did one thing. He stopped reading for volume and started reading for depth. He implemented the exact 3 principles you've just learned. Active recall over passive reading. Mental visualization tied to emotion. Space and repetition applied with intention. 6 months later, Elijah could recite key concepts from books he read once. He became the guy people turned to at work for insight and clarity. He stopped collecting books and started living them. You don't need a photographic memory. You don't need to read faster. You just need to remember better. And that happens when you stop reading like everyone else. So let's bring it home. You've just discovered the hidden art of remembering everything you read. You learned why your brain forgets most things it doesn't emotionally connect with. You discovered how to turn reading into a physical, visual, and emotional experience. You now know how to build mental hooks, so ideas don't float away, they stick. You understand that repetition is power, but only when spaced, reviewed, and intentional. You've learned that retention isn't talent, it's training. It's not enough to know this, you have to apply it. Every chapter you read from now on is an opportunity. Don't just highlight, question yourself. Don't just underline, recreate it in your mind. Don't just read it once, review what matters 2, 3, 5 days later. Don't read more, read smarter. Because the truth is, your brain is built to remember. You just have to treat it like the muscle it is. Work it, challenge it, engage it, and it will give you back clarity, insight, and transformation. What you've listened to today might seem simple, but don't underestimate it. Simplicity is mastery. And those who master the fundamentals, they always outperform the ones chasing hacks. So whether you're a student in California, a startup founder in New York, a busy mom in Florida trying to carve out 10 minutes of growth, just know this. Every book you read can become a building block in your life. Every idea you retain becomes a competitive edge. Every time you remember what you learn, you unlock a new level of confidence, clarity, and momentum. That's the real secret to learning fast. If this audiobook helps shift the way you learn, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend, colleague, or student who needs it. Drop a comment with one idea you're going to use starting today, and come back in a week to share what you still remember. I dare you. If you want more audiobooks that sharpen your focus, accelerate your memory, and rewire your thinking for success, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a smarter you. Let's grow together. One book, one memory, one idea at a time. You have the tools now. Make your next read unforgettable.